Hey, I was talking to a friend last night, actually, at the opera bar, and we were just talking about, going through the change process and how people either they want to do it or they don't want to do it. Doesn't matter what they say, their actions are going to show you, whether they're wanting to make the changes or not. So, for example, there was this event that we put on for everybody to attend. It was a new experience. It was a great chance for people to grow, use their mind in different ways, and to bond together as a team. And leading up to it, we're pretty accommodating. We sent out messages to everyone to see who's available, what's the best timing, all that sort of stuff. And so we made it in and around everyone's availability as best we could. And of course, everyone's like, yeah, I'll be there. I can't wait for this. This is going to be awesome. And then, of course, at the last moment, most of the people didn't turn up, and they obviously had an excuse, right? Which, when you really pull it apart, it's just bullshit. Excuses, it's just making up reasons why you don't want to step out of your comfort zone, or challenge yourself in ways that you haven't before. So the task itself wasn't such a big deal, but the thing that really annoyed me is that we set up an environment, we put it in the culture for people to lead themselves through changes, and to make it as easy and as relaxed as possible, because I know how difficult change can be and how taxing it can be on the psyche and the body. So we put up these little events and all these different training sessions for people to get tooled up and get some practice with the tools and get some experience and get some new frames of mind in which to approach all these changes in, so it's not so turbulent, and let people off the hook about how big the jumps have to be and all that sort of stuff. But if no one turns up, or very few people turn up, then there's not a lot we can really do, like, I can't want the change for you more than you want it for you. And like Dr. Joe says, if you don't turn up, then it just means you're more in love with your past than your future. That's the nice way of putting it. The way I would put it is, you're just more interested in your addictive emotions that you've allowed your body to train itself into, to override elevated, inspiring thoughts of the mind, and you're just settling for the same old, basically. And for me, to be blunt, that's really a cowardly act, because the changes aren't really that great that I'm asking of people to make. And when I say I'm asking of people, these are people that work for me. These are people that I pay to do a particular job for me, and that job is to lead people through change. And part of that process means you must be able to lead yourself through change. So when people don't turn up to these events that I pay for, basically, like, it's not like it's coming out of their pocket, or they're having to block out time out of their life. I mean, this is part of their job, and they're coming at it to a point where it's they feel, because we're trying to accommodate and make it easier for them, they're coming from a point of view that it's an elective, that they can decide whether they want to do their parts of their job or not. And this really annoys me, because for one, I don't want those people working for me for very much longer, because they don't have the right attitude, and they don't really understand what we're doing. And secondly, whether I take steps to remove them from the company or not, their actions are going to lead them away, because the way we move in this business, in our company, in our culture, is very quickly, and we don't wait around for people to catch up, unless, you know, there are some circumstances where they need support to be able to, you know, have a bit more time or a bit more support to get there. And that's usually predetermined, and it's talked about, and they're aware of it, and they make us aware of it, and then we can put a plan of action in. But generally speaking, if people aren't even going to make the effort to turn up to an event or to practice the tools that they've been given, then I'm not going to wait around for them, and I'm not going to make allowances for them. And the reason being is because when I was, you know, the struggling artist who couldn't afford to pay my rent, it's not because I couldn't go get a job to earn myself the kind of money to have a pretty good lifestyle. I mean, I could be on a 100,000 plus year job in a corporation doing something, you know, like selling phones or selling something, or but it didn't really seem to have any significance long term. Like, it didn't matter whether it was me doing it or somebody else. So I chose to forfeit that and sacrifice that short-term gain, go through the struggle and the pain, of not being able to have that, to choose not to have that lifestyle to begin with, because I was invested in the tools and the abilities that I was going to learn to apply to my own business, and not just my own business, but my own type of business that I would create and invent that wasn't there yet, that needed to be created for the service of people, humankind. And I knew what was at stake, so I made those choices, and I would spend my money on books, and I would spend my money on a high-speed internet access, and I would spend my time on learning all about the tools and the techniques and the abilities that I would need to be able to gain whatever type of information that I needed in order to increase my skill levels and my abilities to be able to arrive in those manifested creations in my reality. Now, I know that not everyone's like me, and I know that I'm at I'm at my own type of level. I mean, there are people that are doing a lot better than me, and there are people that aren't doing so good as me, but I'm not expecting anyone to match my pace, because I've trained myself over, decades to be able to go at the pace that I'm going at, and to the scale and to the degree that I do. But I do expect people to start to make changes and efforts slowly but surely in the direction of what they say they want out of life. So I'm just going to tell a quick story, and this one's a personal one, about the cost of not pursuing this type of work, and of allowing your addictions and your fears and your conditioned behaviors to control your life. So I went back to Melbourne last weekend, and I visited my grandmother, who's 82, and she's a lovely woman. She's a beautiful lady, very kind-hearted, compassionate and supportive, and she's pretty much raised everyone in our family, and been the mother to everyone, and sacrificed a lot of stuff, and more than she really needed to. And I didn't realize this until I started talking to her. And this could potentially be the last time I see her, because she's getting old and she's got a few health issues, and she's not in the right mindset to be able to overcome those genetics. And the example of that is, or at least from the perspective that I saw her, I mean, she could turn it around, but it's up to her. And I've offered support, but whether she takes it or not, it's her choice, it's her life, and who am I to tell her what to do at 82? But I was showing her pictures of when I was travelling overseas earlier this year, and part of those pictures were her hometown in Italy, in Trieste. And although she couldn't specifically remember the names of places because it's been, so long, 60 years or something, I could see that the neural nets were still in her mind, and they were starting to light up, and she was smiling, and she was like reminiscing, and the skin color in her face was changing, and I could see her like literally part of that part of her personality coming back to life, like a resurrection of that part of the personality. And I said to her, she mentioned that she was quite lonely. She's a widow. My grandfather passed away over 10 years now, easy 13 years or something. And she was saying how she's lonely and she wants to get out of. She's sort of housebound. She's sick of it, and she gets all these offers for people to come over and for her to visit, but she's just she's tired and she doesn't really want to leave the house. And I said to her, look, well, what if you came up to Sydney? I'll pay for your ticket, I'll pay for the whole thing, and all you have to do is pack a bag and get on the plane. I'll even have a luxury car come and pick you up from the house, take you to the airport, you get on the plane, you get off the plane, it's an hour's flight, I'll pick you up from the airport and you can come stay with me. And she was like hesitant, you wanted to and then couldn't, and then I said, well, what's stopping you? And she said to me, well, I get sick on the plane, the train and the boat, anything that's not a car, I get sick. What if we went by car? I said, well, it's like 10-hour drive, or it's an hour on the plane. It's simple. And I said, I used to get sick too. I got motion sickness, but now they've got Travel Calm, these tablets, and you can drink ginger beer and ginger ale and take ginger tablets, and it settles your stomach, all that sort of stuff. And that's how I got through it. And after a while, your body gets used to it and you don't need it anymore. And she says, oh yeah, because when I was younger, I get onto the boat from Italy to come to Australia, and I get so sick. I was so sick, and the doctor, he said to Daddy, my grandfather, if your wife not put her feet on the ground, she's gonna die. And she had so much emotion behind this story, and I could see her, like she was almost putting her face into her hands at the dinner table. And she was, because I'm pretty empathic, I started to feel her fear and her nausea start to kick in. She was starting to get sick at the table in her own home. And I was like, well, okay, let's just back it up, let's not go into that feeling. Let's stop there, come back. And I said, okay, I understand you get sick on the boat, but it's a plane, it's a 1-hour plane. Now, here's the interesting thing. I didn't know this until just last week. My grandfather and my uncle, her son, worked for Ansett, which was the competitor of Qantas back before they went insolvent back in the 90s or 2000 era, I think. No, earlier than that, probably the late 80s, early 90s. And they were fitter and turners. They were aeronautical engineers. They would work on the aeroplanes that you and I would travel all over the country and all over the world. And they not only fixed Ansett airplanes, they fixed Qantas airplanes, they fixed American Airlines. Whoever's plane needed maintenance in Melbourne, they would go to the hangar. They worked for Ansett, but they would work on whatever plane was there. And when I say whatever plane, I mean every plane. My grandfather was, highly respected. He trained up so many apprentices into tradesmen, my uncle being one of them, who had their own apprentices who became tradesmen, who had new apprentices, and there was this legacy of aeronautical engineers started by my family. And I just assumed that on my grandfather's holidays, because my grandmother was a stay-at-home housewife and mother, and grandmother, great-grandmother, no, not great-grandmother, not yet, that she would, she's a great-grandmother. Anyway, that they would go on holidays because they would pay less than almost nothing per airline ticket, especially domestic and overseas. There was all these deals going on, and I just assumed that every 3 months or 6 months or whenever they wanted to go on holiday, they just get on an aeroplane and go somewhere. And I found out my grandmother had never been on an aeroplane, and it just bewildered me. It just blew my mind. I was confused. I was like, what? You've never been on a plane? Really? But, our families, the men in our family were aeronautical engineers. We lived near the airport so they could go to and from work every day within half an hour to an hour, and they could be home by 4 o'clock, start at 6 or 7 in the morning, finish at 3 or 4, whatever their shift was, and avoid all the traffic. And that's why you live where you do. And you've never been on a plane? And she says, no, because I got sick. And I said, have you ever tried it again since? She says, no way. So this event, and believe me, I've been on a boat where I've had motion sickness. It is fucking awful. You just feel like you're gonna die, and if you don't, you want to bring it on. I was like, please, I need either get me off this fucking boat or fucking kill me, because if I have to deal with this anymore, this disorientation, it's any escape is what I need right now. Okay. And I get all that. I get that. But it can be overcome if you become aware of it and you understand why you're doing it. And so when I heard that story, that's a really, it's so sad for me, because it's my grandmother and I love her so much and I want her to have a good life, she's worked so hard, she's maintained a household for generations and extended family and friends of family and neighbors. Like, she's a pillar of the community. And I know she's getting old and she'd probably hang on for a long time anyway, but I wanted her last few years to be of freedom. Okay, like, you've done your dash, you've looked after everyone, you've raised everyone, you've held the fort for all these decades. Now just go and do whatever the fuck you like. Do anything you want to do because you deserve it. And we're all okay. You don't need to look after us. We love it. We love it when you do, but you don't need to. So just go off and do what you need to do. Anyway, she can't do that because she's limited herself in terms of travel. She just can't allow herself to travel. She can't even allow herself to dream about it, because as soon as she does, the memory of the event of having motion sickness kicks in, and it just overwhelms her, overrides her. Her body starts to override that potential future and collapses back down into a safe environment, which now, because the addiction, you need, with an addiction you need more of the same to get the same feeling, to feel satisfied. Her addiction now, from that time of being sick and wanting safety, back on land, translated into a home, translated into, all this, and now she's 82, and although her soul wants something new, she wants to feel alive again, she just can't allow herself, because the addiction is so great now that she watches the news and she creates all this stuff in her head and all this fear to make being at home feel justified and safe. And I could go in there and I could start rewiring and repatterning things, but I can't imagine 60 years of change, because it's almost like she's at the point in her life where it's like, I'm too old now. I'm too old to make the change. And, even if I do, I have to deal with the loss of 60 years of not living life the way I wanted to. Although I have this great life and beautiful family, there are certain choices I would have made all through my life, which would have been just easy little changes here and there, just showing up to things, just trying something new, just tasting that new food that I've never tried before, just going to that place and seeing what would happen if I went there, taking that little tiny risk that's just outside the comfort zone, that even if I fell over and made a mistake or made a fool of myself, it wouldn't really matter in the long run anyway. Who cares? No, I wouldn't even remember the people that would laugh at me back at that time in my life. So these are the things that, because I need to be gentle, I don't want to push her into that, even though if she had the right tools and the awareness and the focus she could turn it all around. We're talking about now, science is saying that, we can turn genes on and off, and one is the aging gene, and then we can tweak another gene which reverses the biological age. And science and medicine are saying now that it could be possible for our generation to be the first to live forever. And I don't mean I mean because of the advances and because of the awareness around how the body works. And the body rejuvenates itself, it recreates itself every day. I think every second you've got 10,000 cells that die and 10,000 new ones that replace those cells. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of reasons why you should. And the main reason for me now is, as much as I love and care for my grandmother, I don't want to be 82 living alone in my home, in my house, which I've worked all my life to secure, only to not feel safe in my own home, which is supposed to be there for my security. And realize that at a conscious or unconscious level, whether I allow myself, my whole life I've worked towards something that is not even there. So that's a negative way to motivate yourself. You don't use that your whole life, but it should be enough to get you shaken up enough to move forward, to get shit done. And I don't mean you have to go in there and charge like life's a CrossFit session, but you need to think about the long game. Who do you want to be when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old? And what tiny, almost insignificant moments in time, what risks, what changes can you make that don't really matter in the short term right now, that could make a big difference at the end of your life? If we were talking finances in terms of dollars and cents, if you save 10% of everything you earned right now So if you made $100, you put $10 aside, and you did that for the rest of your life till you're 80, and you put it in a bank account with compounding interest, and then every time that account gets up to $10,000, you reinvested that in an investment that was going to make you 10% again and return your money, and you did that over and over again till you were 80. Where the hell would you be? I tell you what, I tell you where you wouldn't be. You wouldn't be where you would be if you hadn't done it. That's where you would be.